A funny thing can happen when your practice test scores are going really well, you're hitting your target score, maybe you're actually scoring above your target score and you're worried that things are just going to somehow fall apart at the last second. Maybe you want to get to the point where your scores are at or above your target score. Regardless, I'm going to share with you exactly what to do. So if it's the case for you where you're taking real recent practice tests under actual test day conditions, you have nothing to worry about. Just maintain your scores. Take a practice test every single week, review it in depth. It doesn't need to be anything more than that in the final weeks before the test. Of course, if you're not at this point and you want to get there, we've got to create a schedule for you to maximize the number of practice tests that you're going to take. If you've got more than 6 months, you could cover every single practice test ever released. Of course, they're changing the LSAT later this year, removing the logic game section, adding a second score logical reasoning section. And so the folks over at LSAC have changed things up inside Law Hub to remove the game sections from the practice tests and consolidate all the exams, reducing it from 70-something exams in the old version of Law Hub to 58 exams in the new version of Law Hub. So of course, you could easily do 58 practice tests in 6 months or more. That'd work out to about 10 practice tests a month, which is about 1 practice test every 3 days. You could do some of those in full, some of them in part. If you've got 4 to 5 months before the test, just do the most recent 40 exams or so. If you've got 2 to 3 months, the most recent 30, and less than 2 months, I'd focus specifically on the most recent 20. I don't want you trying to cram it all into just 1 month, 60-something exams or 80-something exams. It's just too much. We don't want you to burn out. Of course, if you want to score in the top 1% of test takers, you got to study differently than 99% of test takers. I'm assuming here that you already are familiar with all the conventional standard methods of studying that frankly just don't work that well for a lot of students. I'm going to recommend that instead you adopt some unconventional methods of studying. So I don't want you just drilling practice questions. I don't want you copying how others solve questions. I don't want you using explanations as a crutch. Instead, I want you to get to the point where you can see the exam from the test maker's point of view. This might involve taking a logical reasoning argument, the stimulus, and transforming it from one question type into another, reframing the argument from a strengthening question to a weakened question to a flaw question to necessary assumption, for example. We manipulate it because you could imagine that one test writer writes the argument, another writes the question stem, another writes the answer choices, another evaluates all of them, kind of like it's an assembly line. Now, of course, whether they actually do it that way or not is irrelevant. The point is they could do it that way. And so I want you to develop that ability to get beyond just thinking blindly, question stem type, apply this strategy like a robot. I want you to engage with it like a human being with high-level reasoning abilities where you can see the code underlying the matrix like Neo does, right? So being able to transform it from one type into another allows you to manipulate the very pieces of logic that you're dealing with. You might try rewriting an entire reading count passage in simpler language, like you could explain to a 5-year-old. You might read a passage and do just the main idea questions to make sure that you are clear on what exactly even is the main idea. These strategies I share with you for logical reasoning and reading comp are just a couple of the tools in my toolbox for the Socratic review method framework I've developed to help students understand the mistakes they're making so they can avoid making those same mistakes going forward. This is a strategy that's helped countless of my students score in the 170s. If you're interested in finding out more, you can check out the links below this video to book a call with me and my team. We'd be glad to help you out. Now, of course, logic games are being removed from the exam later this year after the June test, and there are roughly 400 actual official released logic games. Of course, you may not have time to do all of them between now and June, but I don't want you doing any Sudoku or crossword puzzles because they might help with the LSAT. You've got enough real material to use, but one strategy you might try is writing your own LSAT questions. I learned a ton when I wrote my own unofficial logic games of all different types, ordering, grouping, different types of ordering, different types of grouping, in and out, matching. I learned about the tricks and traps test makers lay for students to get them to confidently choose wrong answer choices and walk away feeling good about it, not even realizing they made a mistake. And so you may learn a lot from the same exercise. My students have learned a ton from trying this out. You might also learn a lot from writing your own explanations. I learned a ton When I wrote my own explanations for over 1,000 logical reasoning questions, including the argument and all 5 answer choices, what made a wrong answer choice tempting, what ultimately made it wrong, what made a right answer choice unappealing, but what ultimately makes it correct. Because of course you have these traps of encouragement towards the wrong answer and traps of discouragement away from the right answer. And until you figure out which tricks and traps you personally are uniquely prone to falling for, you can't help but end up making the same mistake again. So my goal, of course, is to help you avoid being in that situation in the first place. Anyway, folks, that's all for now. I hope you found the video helpful. If you did, please do me a favor and share it with someone who needs to see it. And in the meantime, I wish you all the best and take care.